Imagine your daily walk to work, but instead of cars, you're dodging a 30-foot-long Allosaurus. Picture trying to grow crops while a herd of hungry Edmontosaurus eyes your struggling sprouts. Human history, our very bodies, and the world around us would be unrecognizably transformed if the dinosaurs had sidestepped that giant space rock. Sleep might become a luxury few could afford with nocturnal hunters like Troodon, making the night a terrifying ordeal. Number 9. Our cities would be wildly different, or not exist at all. Think about your town or city. Now add a 40-ton Argentinosaurus lumbering down Main Street. It's not just about the occasional 4-Rex wanting a snack. The sheer scale and needs of giant dinosaurs would reshape human settlements from the ground up, if they could even exist. Large herbivorous dinosaurs, like the long-necked sauropods, traveled in herds. A single herd could consume hundreds of tons of vegetation in a short period. Any settlement attempting to cultivate land nearby would face constant devastation. Imagine trying to build a fence tall enough or strong enough to keep out a determined Brachiosaurus, stretching up to 40 feet, or a herd of Triceratops, each weighing as much as 2 elephants, pushing through. Early agricultural societies would find it nearly impossible to establish permanent, large-scale farming. This alone changes the entire trajectory of human civilization, which is built on surplus food. So where would people live? Perhaps not in sprawling cities on open plains. One theory suggests humans would adopt an arboreal lifestyle, building homes high in colossal reinforced trees, much like some primates do today, but on a much grander and more permanent scale. Think Huok villages, but built out of necessity and fear, with complex pulley systems for resources and heavily guarded rope bridges. Or we might have gone underground. Extensive cave systems, naturally fortified or painstakingly expanded, could offer protection from both the colossal herbivores and the terrifying carnivores. Entrances would be narrow, easily defensible, and disguised. Daily life would revolve around cautious foraging trips and maintaining these subterranean fortresses. The very materials we build with would be different. Wood might be too flimsy against larger creatures. Stone, and lots of it, would be essential. Perhaps early humans would learn to utilize natural rock formations, cliffsides, and mesas as the foundations for their communities. Think of something like Petra in Jordan, but built not for beauty or trade, but for sheer survival against creatures that could literally walk through a conventional wall. Roads, as we know them, might not exist. How do you maintain a path when a herd of hadrosaurs uses it as a migratory route? Travel between settlements would be incredibly perilous, likely done in heavily armed groups sticking to terrain unfavorable to large dinosaurs, like dense, thorny forests or treacherous mountain paths. Each journey would be an expedition. Concept of a city center or downtown might be replaced by the most defensible point. Water sources would be fiercely guarded and likely the sites of the most intense conflicts, not just between human groups, but between humans and dinosaurs. Imagine trying to fetch water from a riverbank frequented by Spinosaurus, a predator larger than a T-Rex, with a taste for anything that moves. The air itself might be a domain for smaller, more agile dinosaurs. Pterosaurs, if they too survived and continued to evolve, could pose threats from above. This would mean even treetop or cliff-face dwellings would need overhead protection. Roofs wouldn't just be for rain. Ultimately, the pressure from these giant creatures could mean that large, concentrated human populations simply wouldn't be feasible. Humanity might exist in smaller, more scattered, highly defensive enclaves with limited contact between them. The dream of a global, interconnected civilization would face a multi-ton, scaly, and often very hungry obstacle at every turn. Forget zoning laws. Survival would be the only urban planning principle. Number 8. Your diet would be interesting. Meal times in a world still ruled by dinosaurs would be a completely different ballgame. Forget strolling to the supermarket for your weekly groceries. Finding enough food to survive while avoiding becoming food yourself would be the primary daily struggle. First, let's consider what the dinosaurs are eating. Massive herbivores, from the Stegosaurus to the Ankylosaurus, would be consuming vast quantities of plant matter. This means intense competition for edible plants. Fruits, nuts, tubers, and leafy greens that early humans relied on would also be on the menu for countless herbivorous dinosaurs, many of whom were far more efficient at foraging in bulk. Humans would have to be incredibly resourceful, identifying less palatable or harder to reach plant sources, or perhaps developing methods to protect small garden plots, a Herculean task in itself. What about meat? Hunting small mammals, birds, and reptiles, much as early humans did, would still be an option. But the presence of giant carnivores like Tyrannosaurus rex, Allosaurus, or packs of Utahraptors would make hunting expeditions incredibly dangerous. Not only would humans be competing for prey, but they would also be prey. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every distant roar, would signal potential death. Could humans hunt dinosaurs for food? It's a tantalizing thought. A single large dinosaur could feed a group for weeks. Dinosaur eggs, if they could be found and retrieved without angering a protective Maasora or a hungry Oviraptor, would be a rich source of protein. But taking down an adult dinosaur, even a medium-sized one, with primitive weapons like spears or arrows, would be an immense challenge fraught with peril. A wounded Triceratops with its massive horns and protective frill would be a terrifying opponent. A pack of agile, intelligent raptors would likely turn the hunters into the hunted. Perhaps humans would become expert scavengers, following large carnivores from a safe distance to pick at the remains of their kills. This, too, is risky. Other scavengers, including smaller, faster dinosaurs, would also be competing for these leftovers. And there's always the chance the original killer might return. Our digestive systems might even have evolved differently. Perhaps humans would develop a greater tolerance for tougher plant fibers, or more efficient ways to process protein from unconventional sources, like insects, which might thrive in a dino-dominated ecosystem. The concept of picky eaters wouldn't exist. You'd eat what you could find, or you wouldn't eat at all. Food preservation would be critical. Without refrigeration, any large kill would need to be quickly processed, smoked, dried, or salted, if salt was accessible, to make it last. This would require a significant amount of labor and resources, all while keeping watch for hungry dinosaurs. The idea of cuisine, as we know it, with its delicate flavors and elaborate preparations, might never develop. Food would be functional, a means of survival. Feasts would be rare, and likely centered around a hard-won kill or a lucky find of undefended eggs. The safest bet for a regular food supply might be coastal living, relying on fish, shellfish, and marine mammals, assuming aquatic reptiles like plesiosaurs or mosasaurs, if they too survived in this scenario, didn't make that too hazardous. Even water sources would be dangerous. Watering holes would attract all manner of dinosaurs, both predator and prey, making every trip for a drink a life or death gamble. Humans would need to be incredibly cunning, perhaps, developing methods to collect rainwater or find hidden springs. In a dinosaur world, your next meal is a constant question, and the answer is often terrifying. Number 7. Human evolution might have taken a sharp turn. If our early hominid ancestors had to contend with a world teeming with dinosaurs, the path of human evolution could have been dramatically altered. The relentless pressure of giant predators and colossal herbivores would have been a powerful selective force, shaping our bodies and minds in ways we can only imagine. Consider our physical bipedalism, a hallmark of human evolution, offered advantages like freeing our hands for tool use and allowing us to see over tall grasses. But in a world with agile, fast-moving predators like Deinonychus, or the terrifyingly large Giganotaurus, being relatively slow and upright might have been a significant disadvantage. Perhaps humans would have evolved to be much faster runners, with longer legs and more efficient metabolisms for sprinting. Or conversely, we might have become smaller and more adept at hiding, developing traits that favored stealth and camouflage. Think smaller, wiry frames, perhaps with skin tones that better matched the environment, or even the ability to remain incredibly still for long periods. Our senses would likely be far more acute. Imagine needing hearing sharp enough to detect the distant footfalls of a T-Rex, or eyesight capable of spotting a camouflaged Utahraptor in dense foliage from a great distance. Our sense of smell might have become as keen as a bloodhound's, allowing us to detect predators, find hidden food sources, or sense water. Night vision could have been a common human trait if nocturnal activity was the safest way to avoid diurnal behemoths. Cognitive evolution would also be heavily influenced. Problem-solving skills, cooperation, and communication would be paramount for survival. The need to outsmart creatures that were bigger, stronger, and faster would drive the development of intelligence. Perhaps human language would have evolved earlier and with a greater emphasis on conveying complex information about threats and resources quickly and efficiently. Group cohesion would be essential. Lone individuals would be easy targets. This could lead to even stronger social bonds and more sophisticated cooperative hunting and defensive strategies. Tool use would undoubtedly be accelerated, but the focus might be different. Early tools might have been less about hunting and more about defense, creating better fortifications, noisemakers to scare off dinosaurs or traps. The discovery and control of fire would be an even more crucial turning point, providing not just warmth and a way to cook food, but also a vital deterrent against many dinosaurs. What about our lifespan and reproductive strategies? In a high predation environment, reaching old age would be a rarity. This might lead to earlier maturity and reproduction, with a focus on having more offspring to ensure some survive. The extended childhood and long period of dependency characteristic of modern humans might be a luxury that couldn't be afforded. Even our emotional makeup could be different. Constant fear and stress might lead to a heightened fight or flight response, becoming a permanent state. Traits like extreme caution, vigilance, and perhaps even a form of communal paranoia could become ingrained. Trust would be reserved for a very small group, and suspicion of outsiders or new environments would be a survival mechanism. The very definition of human could be different. Pressures exerted by a dinosaur-dominated world might have pushed our ancestors down an evolutionary path that resulted in a species physically and mentally quite distinct from Homo sapiens as we know ourselves today. We might be tougher, quicker, more instinct-driven, and perhaps less inclined towards the kind of abstract thought that led to art and philosophy, with all our mental energy focused purely on staying alive. Number 6. Technology would be all about dino-defense or dino-indiation. Imagine a world where the primary driving force behind every technological advancement is not convenience or communication, but the urgent, ever-present need to deal with dinosaurs. Human ingenuity, which gave us sapquakes and space travel, would be laser-focused on surviving encounters with creatures that could swallow you whole or crush your home without a second thought. Early tools like sharpened stones and wooden spears would quickly prove inadequate against the thick hides of many dinosaurs or the sheer size and ferocity of large carnivores. This would spur rapid innovation in weaponry. Think less about hunting deer and more about deterring, or perhaps even injuring, a charging Ceratosaurus. Long reinforced pikes, perhaps tipped with obsidian or fire-hardened wood, would be essential for group defense. The invention of the bow and arrow would be a game-changer, allowing for attacks from a safer distance, but arrows would need to be incredibly powerful and accurately placed to have any effect on larger dinosaurs. Traps would become an art form. Pit traps, large enough to hold a medium-sized theropod, would be dug and camouflaged around settlements. Snares made from incredibly strong vines or sinew might be used for smaller, but still dangerous dinosaurs. Perhaps humans would learn to use the environment to their advantage, luring dangerous dinosaurs into rockfalls or boggy areas. Control of fire would be paramount. Beyond warmth and cooking, fire would be the ultimate defensive weapon. Fortifications would likely include permanent fire pits or torches at key defensive points. The ability to create and sustain large bonfires could deter nocturnal predators and keep herbivores from encroaching too closely on settlements. Greek fire, or similar sticky, flammable substances, if discoverable with prehistoric chemistry, would be invaluable. Consider transportation. Forget a leisurely stroll. Movement between safe zones would be a military operation. Perhaps humans would develop specialized, lightweight armored carts pulled by humans or hardy, non-dinosaurian pack animals, if any survived and were tameable. These would be designed for speed and defense, not comfort. Water travel in sturdy covered boats might be preferred where possible, especially if large aquatic dinosaurs were less common in certain rivers or coastal areas. Could there be any dino integration? Domestication of dinosaurs is a highly debated topic, even in speculative scenarios. Most large dinosaurs, especially carnivores, would likely be untamable. However, perhaps some smaller, herbivorous dinosaurs, if they possessed a suitable temperament and social structure, could theoretically be managed or herded in a very controlled way. Imagine communities that managed to corral a group of small, relatively docile ornithomins, ostrich-like dinosaurs, for their eggs, or as an early warning system. This is a long shot, as dinosaurs are reptiles, and reptile domestication is virtually unheard of due to their different brain structures and behaviors compared to mammals. More likely, technology would focus on using dinosaur materials. Tough dinosaur hides could be used for armor or building materials. Bones could be fashioned into tools, weapons, or structural supports. Teeth and claws might become prized for their sharpness and durability. Communication technology would also be vital. Drum signals, smoke signals, or complex horn calls could be used to warn neighboring settlements of dinosaur movements or to coordinate defensive actions over long distances. Every piece of technology, every innovation would be weighed against one critical question. Will this help us survive the dinosaurs? Progress would be measured not in terms of comfort or luxury, but in a slightly increased chance of seeing the next sunrise. The Silicon Valley of this alternate world would be dedicated to building better walls and sharper spears. Number 5. Forget dogs. Meet your pet Deinonychus? Maybe not. The idea of having a dinosaur as a companion animal, a prehistoric Fido, is a popular fantasy. Could humans, in a world where dinosaurs never went extinct, actually domesticate any of these fascinating creatures? The reality is probably far less cuddly and much more complicated. Domestication is a long, complex process that requires certain traits in the animal species: a non-aggressive temperament, a social hierarchy that humans can co-opt, a diet that humans can easily preside, and a willingness to breed in captivity. When we look at dinosaurs, most of them, especially the ones that capture our imagination, fail these criteria spectacularly. Let's start with the carnivores. Could you domesticate a Compsognathus, a small, nimble predator? Perhaps in a very limited sense, they might hang around human settlements for scraps, acting as a sort of pest control, but they would likely remain wild and potentially nippy. Trying to domesticate a pack hunter like Deinonychus or Utahraptor would be incredibly dangerous. Their intelligence and cooperative hunting strategies would make them formidable, and their predatory instincts would be almost impossible to suppress. Pet raptor would be more likely to see its human owner as a potential meal or a rival. What about herbivores? Some smaller ornithopods, perhaps? But even herbivores can be dangerous. Think of a modern-day cassowary or an ostrich birds, the descendants of dinosaurs, that are certainly not easily tamed and can be very aggressive. Tame juvenile triceratops might seem manageable, but what happens when it grows into a multi-ton adult with powerful horns and territorial instincts? Many large herbivores were herd animals, which is a good start for domestication, but their sheer size, dietary needs, vast amounts of vegetation, and potential for panic or defensive aggression would make them challenging, if not impossible, to manage as livestock or companion animals in the way we manage cows or sheep. The reptilian nature of dinosaurs is also a significant hurdle. Mammals, from which most of our domesticated animals come, have different brain structures and social behaviors. Reptiles generally don't form the same kind of social bonds with humans. They operate more on instinct and are less likely to seek human affection or respond to training in the same way a dog or a horse does. Instead of true domestication, humans might develop a kind of wary coexistence or even a form of taming for very specific purposes with a few select smaller species. Perhaps certain small, non-aggressive dinosaurs could be caught young and raised in captivity, not as pets, but as a source of eggs or grimly meat. But this is a far cry from a loyal companion. It's more likely that the relationship between humans and dinosaurs would remain one of predator and prey, or a competitor and nuisance. Humans would likely focus their animal husbandry efforts on any surviving mammals that were more amenable to domestication, if any such mammals managed to thrive and grow large enough in a dinosaur's world. The niche for man's best friend would probably still be filled by a canid, if wolf-like creatures existed and could be domesticated under such pressures. So the dream of riding a raptor to work or having a baby brachiosaurus in your backyard is probably just that, a dream. In a dinosaur world, the animal kingdom would be a source of constant danger, not companionship. Any animal interaction would be approached with extreme caution, and the idea of a pet dinosaur would likely be seen as suicidally foolish. Number 4. Art, culture, and religion would be dinocentric. The sheer, awe-inspiring and terrifying presence of dinosaurs would permeate every aspect of human culture, shaping our stories, our beliefs, our art, and our understanding of the world. Just as ancient civilizations deified the sun, the moon, and powerful animals like lions and eagles, a world with dinosaurs would see these magnificent creatures elevated to divine status or cast as primal demons. Imagine the earliest cave paintings. Instead of bison and deer, the walls would be adorned with dramatic scenes of T-Rex's hunts, or more likely, T-Rexes hunting humans, herds of triceratops, and the graceful flight of pterosaurs. These wouldn't just be depictions of daily life. They would be imbued with spiritual significance, attempts to understand, appease, or gain power over these dominant life forms. Colors would be derived from minerals and plants, depicting the scaly hides, sharp teeth, and massive claws in vivid detail. Mythology and folklore would be rich with dinosaur figures. Creation stories might speak of colossal sauropods shaping the mountains and rivers, or of a fearsome carnivorous god who demands sacrifice. Trickster tales might feature clever small dinosaurs or cunning humans outwitting larger, more brutish ones. Heroic epics would undoubtedly narrate the legendary deeds of hunters or protectors who faced down the most fearsome thunder lizards. Every culture would have its own pantheon of dinosaur gods and monsters, its own tales of terror and bravery. Religious practices would revolve around dinosaur spirits or deities. Shamans might wear dinosaur bones or teeth, attempting to channel their power or appease their spirits. Rituals might be performed to ensure safe passage through dinosaur territory, to pray for protection from predators, or to thank a dinosaur god for a successful, scavenged meal. Sacred sites might be places where dinosaurs are frequently seen, or where fossils of even more ancient ancestor dinosaurs are found. The cycle of life and death, so central to many religions, would be starkly illustrated daily by the interactions in the dinosaur world. Music and dance would also reflect the dinosaur theme. Rhythmic drumming might imitate the heavy footfalls of a sauropod, or the frantic heartbeat of a chase. Dances could reenact hunts, escapes, or the movements of different dinosaur species. Songs would tell stories of great beasts, of narrow escapes, and of the constant struggle for survival. Social structures and traditions could be shaped by interactions with specific dinosaurs. Community living near a migratory route of large herbivores might have annual rituals tied to their passage. Tribe that successfully defended itself against a particular type of predator might adopt that predator as a totem, symbolizing their strength and resilience. Rites of passage for young adults might involve demonstrating courage or skill in navigating dinosaur-infested territories or contributing to the community's defense against them. Even language would be peppered with dinosaur-related terms and metaphors. A stubborn person might be as thick-skulled as a Pachycephalosaurus. A dangerous situation could be walking into a raptor's nest. The vocabulary for describing different types of dinosaurs, their behaviors, their tracks, and their sounds would be incredibly rich and nuanced, a matter of life and death. Our very understanding of beauty and power would be shaped by these creatures. The iridescent sheen of a particular dinosaur's scales, the awesome power of a T-Rex's jaws, the graceful arc of a pterosaur's flight, these would be the images that define majesty and terror. Art wouldn't just be a pastime. It would be a fundamental way of processing, understanding, and attempting to exert some small measure of control over a world dominated by giants. Number 3. The world's ecologues. A prehistoric park everywhere. If the Chicxulub asteroid had missed, the Earth's ecosystems 65 million years later would be a vastly different, and likely far more dangerous, tapestry of life. Dinosaurs wouldn't just be present. They would be the dominant, large animals, shaping every forest, plain, and waterway. Firstly, plant life would have co-evolved extensively with giant herbivores. We might see forests of incredibly tough, fast-growing, or even toxic plants, adaptations to withstand constant grazing pressure. Perhaps some plants would develop symbiotic relationships with smaller dinosaurs or insects for pollination and seed dispersal, different from the systems we see today. Open plains might be vast, grazed down by enormous herds of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians, resembling the African savanna, but with a much larger cast of grazers. The sheer biomass of these herbivores would mean a colossal amount of vegetation was constantly being consumed, impacting soil composition, water cycles, and the overall landscape. The diversity of dinosaurs themselves would likely be immense. Just as mammals diversified into countless forms after the dinosaurs' actual extinction, dinosaurs would have continued to evolve, filling new niches. We might see even larger sauropods, more specialized carnivores, feathered dinosaurs of every shape and size, and perhaps even some dinosaurs adapting to colder climates if ice ages still occurred. The skies would be filled with a variety of pterosaurs, and potentially even early forms of birds struggling to compete. What about mammals? Mammals existed alongside dinosaurs during the Mesozoic era, but they were generally small nocturnal creatures, living in the shadows. Without the mass extinction event, mammals might have remained relatively small and marginalized, unable to compete effectively with the well-established dinosaurs for resources and ecological niches. Perhaps some larger mammals would evolve, but they would likely be specialized to avoid direct competition, maybe burrowing forms or highly arboreal species. Age of mammals, as we know it, would simply not have dawned. Primates, including our early ancestors, would face an even more challenging environment for survival and diversification. Predator-prey dynamics would be intense and complex. Large theropods like T-Rex or Allosaurus would be apex predators, but there would also be a multitude of medium and small-sized carnivores, each with its own hunting strategies and preferred prey. Pack-hunting raptors would be a constant threat to almost everything smaller than them. Pressure from these diverse predators would keep herbivore populations in check, but would also make life incredibly precarious for any smaller creatures, including humans. Other animal groups would also be affected. Reptiles like crocodiles, snakes, and lizards would likely be more diverse, and in some cases larger, thriving in a warmer world, potentially dominated by their distant cousins. Amphibians might find it harder to compete. Insect life could be incredibly varied, with some insects evolving to enormous sizes in the oxygen-rich environments that sometimes characterized prehistoric eras or developing unique defenses against dinosaur predation. Disease. Ecologies would also be different. Dinosaurs, like all animals, would have their own array of parasites and diseases. Some of these might be transmissible to humans or other mammals, creating new health challenges. The entire planet would effectively be a prehistoric park, but without fences or safe zones. Every environment, from dense jungles to open plains, from rivers to coastlines, would be shaped by and populated with dinosaurs. The sounds of the wild would be roars, screeches, and heavy footfalls, not the chirping of songbirds or the rustling of small mammals as prominently. It would be a world of giants, a world of constant ecological battles, where the niches for creatures like humans would be narrow and fiercely contested. The balance of nature would be a dinosaurian balance. Number 2, kiss goodbye to peaceful nights and many days. Imagine a world where true peace, the kind that allows for restful sleep and untroubled days, is a forgotten luxury. In a world shared with dinosaurs, human existence would be defined by constant vigilance, an unending state of alertness where every shadow could hide a threat and every unfamiliar sound could signal an approaching predator. Daylight hours, while perhaps offering better visibility, would be no guarantee of safety. Large herbivores, while not intentionally aggressive unless provoked or protecting young, would still pose a significant threat due to their sheer size. A grazing herd of iguanodon could accidentally trample a human settlement or foraging party. Territorial dinosaurs like triceratops could charge with little warning if they felt their space was invaded. And of course, diurnal predators would be actively hunting. An encounter with a Tyrannosaurus rex in broad daylight would be a terrifying and likely final experience. Foraging for food, collecting water, or moving between shelters would be tasks fraught with peril, requiring lookouts, defensive formations, and an intimate knowledge of dinosaur behavior and favored hunting grounds. The night would belong to a different class of terrors. Many predators are nocturnal, and in a dinosaur world, this would mean creatures perfectly adapted to hunt in low light. Imagine small, agile, and intelligent pack hunters like Trudon, with their large, forward-facing eyes designed for night vision, silently infiltrating a human encampment. Their relatively small size would allow them to slip through defenses that might deter larger beasts, and their pack behavior would make them incredibly effective killers. The rustling of leaves or the snap of a twig in the darkness would send shivers of primal fear down every spine. Sleep would be a precious and dangerous commodity. Who would dare to fall into a deep slumber when a nocturnal predator could be silently stalking nearby? Humans might adapt by sleeping in shifts, with some members of the group always on watch. Sleeping areas would need to be heavily fortified, perhaps deep within caves with narrow, easily guarded entrances, or high in trees with retractable ladders. Even then, the sounds of the prehistoric night, the distant roars, the strange calls, the unnerving silence that could mean a predator is near, would make restful sleep nearly impossible. Chronic sleep deprivation could become a common human condition, affecting physical health, cognitive function, and emotional stability. The psychological toll would be immense. Living under constant threat generates chronic stress. Adrenaline and chitin would be coursing through human veins much of the time. This could lead to heightened anxiety, paranoia, and aggression. The world would be perceived as an inherently hostile place. Joy and relaxation would be fleeting moments, overshadowed by the omnipresent danger. Children would grow up learning fear as their first and most important lesson, taught to recognize the signs of different dinosaurs and the appropriate escape or defense strategies from a very young age. Their bedtime stories wouldn't be fairy tales, but cautionary accounts of encounters with real monsters. Everyday activities that we take for granted would become life or death calculations. Need to relieve yourself? You'd better check your surroundings carefully. Want to explore a new area? You'd need a heavily armed escort and a very good reason. The simple act of existing would be an exercise in risk management. The concept of a stroll in the park would be absurd. Park would be everywhere, and it would be full of things that want to eat you or could crush you by accident. Peaceful coexistence would be a myth. It would be a constant, nerve-wracking struggle for survival, day and unending night. Number 1. We might not be the apex predators, or even exist. This is the most profound and unsettling consideration. In a world where dinosaurs never went extinct, humans might not have risen to become the dominant species on Earth. In fact, our very existence as Homo sapiens could have been an impossibility. Early hominids, our distant ancestors, were relatively small, slow, and not particularly well armed by nature. They evolved in Africa, and their survival and spread were challenging enough, even in a world dominated by Cenozoic mammals like saber-toothed cats and giant bears. Now, introduce into that environment a full roster of Mesozoic dinosaurs. Imagine Australopithecus or early Homo erectus trying to compete for resources and avoid predation in a landscape populated by agile raptor packs, massive carnivores like Spinosaurus or Carcharodontosaurus, and colossal herbivores that could reshape the environment. The competition for food would be intense. Early humans were omnivores, relying on plants, scavenged kills, and small game. Dinosaurs, in their vast numbers and diversity, would be consuming many of those same resources on a much larger scale. Large herbivores would decimate plant life, while numerous efficient carnivores and scavengers would leave little behind. Finding enough calories to survive and fuel brain development would be a monumental daily struggle. Predation pressure would be off the charts. Early humans would have been on the menu for a terrifying array of predators. Small bipedal hominids would be relatively easy targets for everything from juvenile tyrannosaurs to packs of Deinonychus. The development of tools and social cooperation, key factors in human ascendancy, might have been severely hampered if populations were constantly being decimated by predation, preventing the accumulation and transmission of knowledge and skills. It's hard to innovate when you're always running for your life. Niche availability is another critical factor. The extinction of the dinosaurs opened up vast ecological niches that mammals, including primates, then radiated into, eventually leading to us. If dinosaurs had continued to thrive and diversify, these niches would have remained filled. There might simply have been no room for a species like Homo sapiens to evolve, a large-brained, tool-using, highly social primate. Perhaps primates would have remained small arboreal creatures, never descending from the trees to take those first crucial steps towards human-like intelligence and bipedalism. Even if early hominids did manage to survive, their evolutionary trajectory would be vastly different. As discussed earlier, they might have evolved into something not recognizably human by our current standards. Perhaps smaller, faster, more rodent-like in their habits, or conversely hyper-aggressive and specialized for defense. The specific environmental pressures that shaped Homo sapiens, the African savanna, the Ice Ages, the particular mix of predators and prey, would be fundamentally altered. The very concept of humans as apex predators would be laughable in a T-Rex's world. We achieved that status through our intelligence, tool use, and ability to cooperate, eventually overcoming creatures larger and stronger than ourselves. But that process took hundreds of thousands of years, in an environment where the competition, while fierce, wasn't on the scale of fully evolved dinosaurian ecosystem. It's a sobering thought. The asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, a catastrophic event for them, was quite possibly the single most important stroke of luck for mammals, and ultimately for us. Without that cosmic reset, the story of life on Earth could have continued with dinosaurs as the stars, and humans might have been at best a minor supporting act, or perhaps a species that never even got a chance to step onto the stage. The apex predator title would firmly belong to a creature with much bigger teeth and a much louder roar.